corned beef for nothing. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right, good. Hi, Facebook. All right. So once we know the underlying issues, which organ and which nutrient, then we can work on it in a more specific way. We can figure out what to include in the diet, what to take out of the diet. All right, so let's talk a little bit about diet. So when it comes to eating, one of the things I'll tell you, what I just did is the absolutely wrong thing to do. So I told you I scarfed down a quick snack, right? Because we were running behind and didn't want you waiting because you were out here so punctually. Thank you for that. But eating fast or chewing inadequately is a really bad idea. Most of us do it all the time. Especially if you work and have kids and have other places to be. You're like, eating in the car with one hand. I'm really good at one hand because I have infants. I can do anything with one hand. I can cook with one hand. I can eat with one hand. Lots of other stuff I won't mention. So when you have chewing, that actually is starting the digestive process, because saliva actually helps to break down your food. So I know this is silly, like this is not why I came to this lecture. That's way too simple, but I'll tell you what, you'd be amazed at what chewing can do for you. Sitting down, and not sitting in your car, but actually sitting, resting in a comfortable, calm environment and eating slowly and chewing your food has a huge impact on your digestive system. So your digestive system, we talked about already, starts in the mouth, ends at the sewer, right? All the things in between. So your digestive system is part of what we call your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's a fancy word for the part of your nervous system that helps you heal. So it has to be calm and not under stress in order to do that. Because if a bear is chasing you, or the tax guy is knocking at the door, or your kids are screaming in the background, your digestive system is not active. It is not, it's doing nothing at that time. It's just like hanging out in there. What is active is your heart's beating faster. You might be sweating a little bit, right? You're nervous, you're anxious. The other part of your nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, the part that helps you run away if a bear is chasing you, that part is active, and the digestion slows or stops. So you can see why if somebody had really bad constipation, why it might be a problem if they were constantly running around, eating on the fly, never sitting down, never chewing their food, right? Because the digestive system is stopped already, and then they're trying to, on top of that, put more food in there, and the body's like, I don't know what you want me to do with that. I am busy handling this bear. I'm busy getting blood flow to your legs so you can run away from the bear, okay? So that's just something to be aware of. So it seems very simple, but it's actually a really important part of it. And the calmly with family. And there's a reason why in Europe they spend an hour and a half eating dinner with a big group of people. It's very social, they're hanging out, they're just chilling out, eating their food slowly. And I would say it's safe to say that they're much healthier than we are, and that they have better digestive systems. I haven't quizzed them lately, but I just have a hunch. So chewing's important, and I'm going to put at rest, okay? So does that mean you're going to do this perfectly every single meal, every time? No, but it's something to look at and something to consider. And if you feel after you eat, if your stomach hurts right after you eat, oh, my stomach hurts, it's because you got up too soon or you never sat down in the first place. So then, the quality of your saliva, that actually has to do with how much toxins are in your food or in your body over a period of time. So one of the things we deal with in our office is toxicity. So chemicals, metals, things like that accumulate in the body. And there's something called the parotid gland. It's right here on the sides of your cheeks, and it produces saliva. And part of the job of that saliva is to get rid of toxins as they come into the body. So it actually tags the toxins, like it puts a little marker on them and says, don't let that one in. Get rid of that one. Make that one go straight to the sewer. So it tags them, that's what it does. I mean, that's not exactly what's happening, but you get the idea. So if that has to happen all the time because you're exposed to lots of toxins from the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you're eating, then the parotid gland gets tired and it doesn't produce as good of a quality of saliva anymore. So that can also impact your digestion. It also makes you more toxic because your body can't keep up. So one of the things that we give people around here is parotid supplements. It's made from parotid glands of cows. Because you don't want to eat parotid glands of cows on your own. Because I make that recommendation and people are like, too chewy. So, because we used to eat the whole animal, right? I mean, once upon a time, if you had animals, you used every little bit of them, including the bones and the ligaments and all of that. And that's because there's nutrition in all of those. And it's because if you eat the heart of an animal, it's actually good for your heart. If you eat the thyroid, it's actually good for your thyroid. But we're a little squeamish about that, and most of us don't raise our own animals anymore, so it's a little harder to come by. So the standard processed supplements that I use, the components in those supplements are organ. Not all of them, but some of them. A lot of them have other things that are, more common, like radishes and carrots and beets and things like that. But along with that, some heart, some liver, some spleen, and some salivary gland. Why not? All right, so then you have the esophagus, right? So you've chewed, theoretically, you've sat down and had a restful chewing episode, and now this food is coming down into your actual esophagus and stomach, and there's little flaps that open and close to let the food down and then to keep it down, right? So people will say, especially in babies, they have this problem where, if the baby lays flat, the food comes back up, they have reflux, right? It's not the flap that's the problem, it's the food that's the problem, irritating the flap. That's especially true in babies. I'm just telling you this from experience because I've never met a baby that needed Zantac, although it's one of the most prescribed medications for children under the age of 6 months. Or is it Prilosec, whatever, choose your poison, but it's antacids, and those are one of the most common things. And it's very common in children to have that because oftentimes they're breastfed and mom's eating something that the baby can't tolerate. Or if they're on formula, the formula is not agreeing with them. So it's often really just a food sensitivity that needs to be handled. 9 times out of 10, in my experience. And easily handled if mom will change her diet or if we change the formula, okay? So just something to be aware of. So then you have this flap. So then it comes down into the stomach. Now, everybody thinks that reflux, like acid reflux, is too much acid, right? That's the general idea. Who believes that that's not true or has heard that it's not true? Yes. It's usually not enough acid. So when you take an antacid, right, against acid, that's blocking the acid, it will short-term help with the symptoms because it will cut out all the acid in the stomach. But long-term it will actually cause a lot more damage, which I'll talk about in a second. So if you eat something and then you get heartburn later, reflux, whatever you want to call it, usually it's because the food did not break down effectively, and now the food is becoming acidic. And that's what's causing the reflux, not the acid that your body produced in the stomach. Because there's supposed to be acid in the stomach, and it has a nice thick lining in there that's protective. When that lining breaks down, you get what's called an ulcer, right? So you don't want that either. So the lining is protective. It can have a really high acidity. The food goes in. If the acidity's not high enough, the food sits there, and if you combine that with too much stress and not chewing enough, then you really got a whammy, right? So it sits there, and it basically rots, which is why it tastes really bad when you burp up if you ever have reflux. It doesn't taste like the food you ate, it tastes like something really terrible. Yeah, that's like rotten food. So the solution to that is not less acid with an antacid. The solution to that is more acid, or better quality acid, I should say. So the way that you do that is by reducing sugar in your diet and refined foods. So refined foods do not do you any favors on many levels, but they definitely weaken your stomach acid. So eating protein actually makes your stomach produce more acid. Now, there's also specific things that can block stomach acid. Obviously, medication, right? That's one thing. Anything that's anti-medication-wise can cause a lot of other issues in the body. So you have antibiotics, that can cause trouble, antacids, hormone pills, so say birth control, that's anti-birth, right? So those things can really disrupt the digestive system. So any imbalance in the hormones. So what we want to do here is we want to maximize or increase stomach acid. This is why when people take apple cider vinegar, the majority of people who take apple cider vinegar, which is acidic, actually get relief from their heartburn. So that's why adding that more acid, because the acetic acid in there increases the body's ability to digest the food, and then it doesn't rot, and then you get less of the actual reflux. Food sensitivities will cause this. So if you specifically have a sensitivity to dairy or sensitivity to corn. That will increase the reflux because it's sensitive, the body reacts to it in a way and it doesn't break down as appropriately as it should, okay? So taking acid, there's papaya enzymes. A lot of the things that we give people for stomach acid problems are acidic things. So like I said, apple cider vinegar, enzymes, so there's papaya enzymes. People just eat papaya or eat pineapple. Those are acidic things. Now the wrong kinds of foods going in, including the wrong kinds of acids going in, cause a problem too. So people, coffee is a problem, tomatoes is a problem. That's a different type of acid than what's actually in acid. Now we're in chemistry class. How's everyone doing? So coffee is not inherently acidic, but it creates acidity. Whereas when you take apple cider vinegar, that is acidic, right? So if you pour apple cider vinegar on something, it'll sort of eat it away. But if you do that with coffee, it won't, right? That's the difference. So it's how it's treated in the body that makes it acidic. It's not actually an acid. So if it's an acid in your hand, it's actually probably good for your stomach. If it's not, but it causes reflux, then it's not so good. Yeah? Yeah, okay, great. We won't go to physics. We'll save that for next time. Okay, so you want to maximize or increase your acid. You want to reduce sugar and foods that you're sensitive to. And I'm here to tell you that if you eat a food and it causes you to feel bad, guess what? You probably shouldn't eat it. I know. It's crazy. All right. So look for symptoms. And I know that sounds silly, but I can't tell you, I couldn't even count how many times over the years someone has said to me, well, when I eat ice cream, I feel terrible. But guess what? I still eat it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. Okay. However, maybe that's your body trying to tell you something. So I can't stress enough that your body is really good at talking to you if you listen, if you learn how to listen. Okay. Sometimes you can get pretty sick, and over a period of time, it becomes more difficult to decipher what your body's trying to tell you. So that's also part of my job. And one of the reasons that I have people do food logs and keep track of what they're eating, because you can have a reaction to a food immediately after eating it, or up to 3 days later, 72 hours later. So, if you eat a food and you don't really have a reaction to it until 72 hours later, do anybody remember what you had 72 hours ago? Corned beef? Maybe. Depends on how many times you had it this week. So, that's a little bit harder to figure out, right? Obviously, the immediate reaction when someone says, I eat ice cream and then I have to run to the bathroom. All right, well, it's probably the ice cream, right? But if they eat ice cream and they don't feel bad until 3 days later, that's going to be trickier. With digestive problems, usually it's faster, but not always. So that's something to be aware of. So looking for symptoms and logging is really important. So you can actually keep track of, okay, what did I have that might have bothered me? What was different in the last 3 days? And it doesn't have to be digestive issues, by the way. I know that's what we're talking about. But knee pain, rashes, sinus congestion, all of those things, same deal. If you're sensitive to a food, within 72 hours, you should notice a change in the symptoms when you have it. So I'll just tell you that the idea of drinking like a glass of milk to settle somebody's acidic stomach, it's a poor idea. Most of us do not digest dairy very well, especially pasteurized milk in its shape and form that it is today. So I don't recommend that. I do recommend trying apple cider vinegar or some sort of enzyme. Like I said, just eating papaya works well. That can be helpful if you can find papaya in your store at that time. The other thing that helps would be peppermint oil. So a lot of people use essential oils. So peppermint tea you can drink. That's helpful for most people. Chamomile tea can be helpful to settle the stomach. Or rubbing peppermint oil on topically. Some people take it internally. Either way, it has to be really good quality if you're going to take it internally. But at the very least, smelling it or rubbing it on. And even, peppermint gum, right? Mint is very calming to the stomach. So those are things that you can do, especially if there's any sort of nausea involved. And then ginger is the other one. So the trick with ginger is that most of the time you can get it in ginger chews. And what are those? It's a big hunk of sugar. Ginger flavored sugar, or the other way around. Sugar flavored ginger, I don't know what it is, but it's too much sugar. So stick more with ginger tea or take ginger root and just pour hot water over it. That's amazing. That's really, really good for the digestive system. Those are things that are good habits to get into all the time. Having a nice cup of peppermint tea or ginger tea before or after a meal can be really helpful. Apple cider vinegar, that's something that people around here do on a regular basis. A couple times a day, just a teaspoon. Usually have to dilute it a little bit. Depends on how hardcore you are. Sometimes you can do it straight. Can you do it straight, Danielle? Yeah, you're hardcore. I know, she is hardcore though, so that's why. I knew that about her. I have to dilute it a little, because I'm slightly less hardcore. All right, so then you have...
They're like, Mom, that's yucky. I'm like, yep.
Yeah, at least she still makes the face, but she gets it down. So then moving into the actual bowel system, we're going to skip over liver, but we're going to come back to it in a little bit. So the bowels, so you have small intestine, large intestine. It's a lot. Feet and feet. I think it's 28 feet. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but a ridiculous amount of stuff in this tiny little spot, okay? So it's all curled up and spiraled around each other in there. So there's a lot that has to happen for the bowels to function normally. And most of our bowels do not function normally in this country. I'll just tell you that straight up. So that's why a lot of people are looking for help with probiotics, prebiotics. I don't recommend, most of the time, I don't recommend yogurt as a probiotic source. And most of it is loaded with sugar, that's why. So if you look at Activia, if you've never done this before, next time you're at the store, look at the Activia and see how much sugar is in one container. And the recommendation for Activia is to eat 3 containers a day to normalize your digestion. Because it has some good bugs in it, and good bugs do help normalize your digestion. However, not if it's loaded with sugar at the same time. It's going to really throw off your digestive system. So I don't recommend Activia. Now, if you have a cow and you want to milk it and make your own yogurt fresh, okay, cool. Or if you know somebody with a cow and you want to get some from them and make it, I'm cool with that. But most of what's in the store, if you already have digestive issues, is probably not going to be really adequate to handle the problem, and it might actually cause a little more trouble. So just for the record. Other things that do have probiotic nature to them, apple cider vinegar, we already talked about. That's the other reason that it helps with digestion. Not only is it the acid, and it helps simulate liver detox, but it actually has good bugs in it because it's a fermented food. Any other fermented foods you guys like? Kombucha? Sauerkraut. Yep, sauerkraut or kimchi, which would be spicy sauerkraut. If you're hardcore, like Danielle. So kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha is like a fermented tea. A lot of people make it at home. Again, it's just got good bugs. So anything that's fermented, so beer is fermented, right? Unfortunately, it's got the alcohol part and it's made with grain, so not as many people tolerate that as a good source of probiotics, but a kombucha is usually well tolerated. Pickles, if they're good pickles, if you are making them yourself or buying the ones that are refrigerated at the store. So once they've cooked them or pasteurized them, then you lose all the good bugs, which was the point, right? So you want the really crispy homemade pickles that are in the refrigerated section, or make them yourself. It's super easy to make yourself. I don't do it because I like to buy them at the store because I like to support the people that do that for me. They're wonderful. That's just me. All right, so these are good things to support good bugs in your system. So they help your gut, they help other areas as well. Now here's the thing. So why do we care about the bugs in your intestines? A couple of reasons. Number one is because they actually help you to get nutrients out of your food. So our body is loaded with bacteria, viruses, fungus that are supposed to be there. A lot of times they also have some that aren't supposed to be there, which can cause problems, right? We know that. But we're actually loaded with good bugs all over the surface of our skin, inside our nose, inside our digestive system. They help us to stay healthy because they fight off bad bugs, so nasties like colds and flus, but they also help us assimilate or break down the food that we eat and get nutrients out of it. So if you don't have enough of the right good bugs in your system, then you're not even going to get nutrients out of the good food you are eating. So what kills these bugs? Antibiotics. Of course, that makes sense, right? Because they are bugs, and that's what antibiotics do. They kill bugs. So antibiotics, antacids, because they neutralize the acid in the stomach, and some of these bugs only live in acidic environments. So antacids, whether that's Tums or Prilosec or something prescribed. So those are a problem. So again, anything that says anti, right, is a problem. Antibiotics, antacids. Then actually genetically modified foods or conventionally grown or conventionally raised meat. Right, so genetically modified foods often actually have a type of bacterial toxin inserted into the DNA. I know I said, this isn't physics still, I'm okay. So now we're in biology instead of chemistry. To actually put a bacteria into the corn to protect it from pests, but the problem is it's in the corn. So when you eat it, now it's in you, and it disrupts the normal bugs in your intestines. And it leads to all kinds of trouble, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of my colleagues, probably the reason why we're seeing such an increase in colon cancer, such an increase in digestive issues, serious digestive issues, perforations of the bowel. I have a friend that practices in New York. She's like, oh yeah, I saw 4 bowel perforations. And I'm talking about the person's walking around and their bowel just like opens up and spills the contents into there. And that's an emergent, life-threatening situation. But that didn't happen. Like that didn't happen 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. That's what we're looking at. Conventionally raised meat in this country, the use of antibiotics, most of the antibiotics that we use, and we use a ton, we use more than any other nation, most of what we use is for animals. Raising chickens, raising cows, raising pigs the way that they're not supposed to be raised, so they get sick, so we have to load them up with antibiotics to keep them from getting sick for the short amount of time that they're being fattened up for slaughter, okay? So this is another reason why, it's one of many reasons, but one of the main reasons why we want to stick with more locally raised animal meats, so, or at least organic, right? So something that's not getting loaded. So organic is not perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than not bothering to care and just kind of loading them up with medications, growth hormones and things like that. Hormones can disrupt bowel function, particularly disrupt the bugs. So I wasn't kidding about birth control pills. Obviously, bioidentical hormones and things like that, and the hormones in food are a problem. But I would say bioidentical hormones would be, birth control hormones is one of the major sources of hormones that I see, because pretty much, the women in their childbearing age oftentimes are on estrogen or progesterone, and that absolutely disrupts the bugs in your gut. So because these disrupt the bugs, and because that ultimately leads to not being able to absorb as many nutrients, because you don't have the right bugs, these by default lead to nutrient deficiency, right? So if you take these medications, they lead to nutrient deficiency because they're disrupting the digestive system and disrupting the bugs. So when you look at antacids increase risk of fracture, increase risk of Alzheimer's and dementia, because they're blocking the absorption of important minerals for your bones and your joints and your brain, which is not what you're thinking like when you sign up to take antacids as a 3-week-old, right? You see why that's a problem? So we have younger and younger people being put on these medications, and it does not allow them to absorb. So their bones won't grow the way they're supposed to. They won't be as strong as they should have been. Same with antibiotics. So it doesn't mean you never ever get exposed to these things, obviously, right? In a perfect universe, you just don't take any of these medications. But in an imperfect universe, if you know this is a risk factor for you, then you just have to be aware of it and then work to get your gut back on track. This is where pre and probiotics come in, right? So these are good sources of probiotics, great sources of prebiotic. So the probiotic is the bugs, the prebiotic is what the bugs eat. It's the soil that the bugs grow on, okay? So you have to have food for the bugs. We're just full of bugs. So prebiotic, it is before probiotic, right? Pre, pro. So pre means before and pro means for, or promoting, okay? So things that are prebiotic would be fiber. So you have like inulin is one that people take as a supplement, inulin fiber. It's usually not necessary. So usually what I recommend is a bunch of veggies. So if you're doing a fermented veggie, you're really ahead of the game, right? Because you have like the vegetable that's already fermented. So you got pre and probiotics in there. So anything that's high fiber, and you can, some people take just a fiber supplement, and that's sometimes okay, depending on the quality of it. If it doesn't have a lot of other garbage added in, it's okay to do that, like apple pectin or something like that. The question is, who needs what? And that's where it gets a little tricky. That's why I do muscle testing, because I don't have those answers. I wish I did. It would make everyone's life a little easier, because I would just write a book, and then I would sit at home with my kid, and I would sell a bunch of people books. And then they would all read the book, and they would get well, and I would still feel good about helping people, but I wouldn't have to stand and muscle test all day. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I like seeing all of you, but just saying, Wouldn't it be easier for all of us? Like, you don't have to come to me, I don't have to be here. It'd be great. But it doesn't work that way. So we have to do it hands-on and then figure out individually what's up. But these are some examples of what you might be looking at. So I will say that from a fiber standpoint and a prebiotic standpoint, a lot of the question I get, anytime I say the word fiber, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? How do you get fiber in your diet?
Bread.
Yes, bread. So everybody thinks, or whole grain, right? Oatmeal, like that's the number one thing. So oatmeal itself isn't inherently bad, but the problem is that it's really high in carbohydrates. Most of it, if you're buying it prepackaged or a little bit pre-cooked, is loaded with sugar, so therefore it's a processed food, right? So a better source of fiber is going to be things like vegetables, whole fruit, nuts and seeds, right? Those have a lot of fiber in them, okay? So it's just a pitfall. Unfortunately, it's marketing, quite frankly, that we've all fallen into, because we learned from TV, and the doctors learned it from TV too, that the way you get your fiber is you eat bread, whole grains, right? But that's not true. So I prefer to get it from vegetables, real food, okay? The stuff that you're less likely to have a sensitivity to, because grains, so everyone hears about gluten, and we talked a little bit about corn, but grains in general in our country tend to be too processed, and they cause problems for a lot of people. So when you're talking about rice, when you're talking about corn, soy, those types of things, those are all the grains typically that people are looking at. So the exception to that might be something like quinoa. Most people still tolerate quinoa, especially if you cook it at a high temperature like a pressure cooker, then it's really well tolerated. So that's something that most people can tolerate. I don't recommend living on the stuff, but it's a nice kind of filler. It's got definitely some fiber in it, got low protein, got some nutrients in it and everything. But that's probably, one of the few grains that I'd recommend having on any kind of large basis. You have to tell me your question again, because I had it. It was a great question.
Smoothies.
Thank you. It was a great question. Oh, see?
Okay.
Right at the right time to ask it too.
Okay.
So the question was, what about green smoothies? So I have to define those words, okay? Because I'll tell you that over the years, people bring in their food logs and it says smoothie. And I say, what's in your smoothie? And they say fruit and ice, or fruit and milk. So the problem with that is that's all sugar. So whole fruit is better than fruit juice, right? But if you take a bunch of it and grind it all up, what do you now have? Fruit juice. It still has some fiber in it, right? So when you talk about a green smoothie, if you're talking about actual green whole vegetables ground up, and then something added to make it a little bit more palatable, right? So maybe some fruit, a little bit of fruit for sweetening, and some sort of liquid.
Well, what I got it from my sister, it's like spinach and little salad greens.
Yep.
Some cucumber, some carrot, a little bit of okra,
Okay.
a little bit of ginger,
Yeah.
some protein powder,
Uh-huh.
some collagen.
Yeah.
What else was in it? And some coconut or almond milk.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah,
that sounds,
that's basically what it was.
yeah, that's a green smoothie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds great.
Okay.
So the only qualifier I would say on that would be always checking to make sure your protein powder doesn't have a bunch of sugar in it, and making sure that your alternative milk doesn't have a lot of sugar in it too, because that likes to hide there. And then the other thing would be that if you have, certain people don't tolerate raw vegetables well if their digestion is in such a poor state. So sometimes you can't do the raw greens, you have to start with only cooked vegetables and kind of work your way up to raw.
Well, my
So
question.
it depends on the person
yeah.
there.
And my question kind of was, is it better than just eating, say, a salad? Because it's a process to make it, it takes time to make it,
Right.
it's a process to consume it, you don't drink it, you don't eat it, it could take an hour or more between making it, eating, whatever. And so, like, some days I just
Well,
don't have the,
Yeah.
like to do it.
So it's not better than doing a salad. You're probably gonna get more vegetables than
Right.
just on a salad, right?
Right,
But you have to keep in mind that if you're not going to do it, it doesn't have any benefit.
Right.
Right? If it's stressful,
Yes.
then it's not a benefit, right? Because we are definitely not trying to add stress to anyone's life.
Because I've got like, dang, I forgot this and.
Right, yeah. So if you're
and
stressed
so then
about
I
it or
wondered,
it's too much,
like, could
then-
you make enough, I mean, is it beneficial or not beneficial? I make 3 or 4 days worth
Mhm.
and store it in the refrigerator.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're making it fresh and storing it fresh, a few days probably isn't going to make or break the nutrient value.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that kind of brings up another idea is that a lot of the vegetables that come into our grocery store have been on a truck for
Right.
how long, right? Weeks, maybe? That's why they spray them with things to make them stay nice and lovely looking. So that's another thing, if you're, growing your own vegetables or you're going to the farmer's market and you're getting, then certainly 3 or 4 days in the fridge.
Right, because I mean,
Good.
most of my fresh vegetables I get at Costco,
Uh-huh.
and they've gone, all their stuff now says organic.
Yeah, they have a lot more
So
organic
I don't
choices.
know,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's going to be a better
But I
option.
thought, I guess it makes sense to do it,
Uh-huh.
but for me to every day,
Uh-huh.
make the dang thing, drink the dang thing.
Like I said, yeah,
It just
if
takes
it's
too much
stressful
time.
or not enjoyable for you,
Yes.
then it's probably not the best
Okay.
option. Yeah, I would say. Or just make a goal like, once a week I'm going to make
Yeah,
this,
or
but the
make,
rest of
or
the
make a
days.
big thing of it, put in the fridge. and
Yeah,
drink
yeah,
it.
have it for a
Okay.
couple days and then do something else the other days. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah,
And the days I leave my house at 5:15, I'm not gonna get up and make one.
Okay, fair enough. Noted.
Yes.
I'll give you a pass on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But the beauty of green veggies and the things that you were sort of running down the list of is that they are very supportive of digestive system because of the nutrients and the fiber, and they're also very supportive of detoxification. So what's in green vegetables is what our body uses to neutralize and get rid of toxins. There's other things too, but that's one of the main things is the stuff that's why broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all that stuff is so good for you. They study it because they're like, did you know that eating broccoli is anti-cancer? It's like, yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I did. But there's a study out there that proves it. What do you know? So when you're taking in those things, the reason that it prevents cancer, the reason that it's good for disease is because it helps the body neutralize toxins. Toxins are what cause disease a lot of times. They cause inflammation and damage. So when you talk about liver, gallbladder, green vegetables, and cooked is okay, like I said, and sometimes you can only tolerate cooked. Like if you eat green raw vegetables and you feel horrible, then that is your body telling you that it's not ready for them. Doesn't mean forever, but it means right now it's not ready for them. So it's either too much detoxification or you just can't break it down effectively. So it's okay to cook your veggies. And I'm going to put on this list too things like onions and garlic. Garlic especially is really good for the liver and gallbladder. Beets, including the greens. So the red part and the green part, or the yellow part and the green part, depending on what kind of beet you're getting. Very, very good. So one of the main supplements that I use here in the office to help people with gallbladder issues is made with beet leaf juice. So it's this lovely purple color. It's called beta food. So beta is beets, right? Betaine, which is what's in beets. So very supportive for the digestive function. So if you have pain after you eat, if you have trouble with ice cream and it sends you to the bathroom, this is what you need. It's not a lactose problem. It's usually a gallbladder problem, and you need some beets to clean out that gallbladder. I'm generalizing here, but I feel safe in saying that this is a sound advice for you. To eat more beets. And oftentimes that'll fix it. Okay, so more beets in your life, more things to flush out the gallbladder. The other thing the gallbladder needs is acid, like we talked about. So that's where the apple cider vinegar or the enzymes will come into play as well. All these nice fermented vegetables or substances that we talked about. So those are all excellent for liver, gallbladder, congestion. So if you have a congested liver, gallbladder, not only will you not tolerate ice cream, greasy fried foods very well, you'll also oftentimes have pain, not only here in the front, but it'll come around to the back, right between your shoulder blades. That's your gallbladder. Doesn't mean you need to remove it. It means you need to be nicer to it and give it a little spa day. Feed it some beet leaf juice, some garlic and stuff. Right shoulder pain can even be, like all the way up into the shoulder, can even be a gallbladder issue. It's the great mimicker. Congestion in the sinuses, especially after eating, like if you get that drainage in your throat. You ever know anybody that eats and every time after they eat they're doing that? That's because something they ate didn't agree with them. Ding, ding, ding. And they probably need their gallbladder supported, so they need some more green veggies and beets. And if they're driving you crazy, then you have to give it, just tell them. Go home. Hey, Dr. Shannon said you need more beets. All right. So if your liver, gallbladder is congested, it can cause all kinds of trouble, including any of these areas being congested, bowels or liver, skin issues, asthma, allergies. So stuff that isn't just, what we consider to be digestive trouble. Definitely immune system issues. So if you have kids or yourself or someone that's sick all the time, that's got lots of colds, lots of flus and things like that, then a lot of times we're looking at a digestive issue because all those bugs, they're your immune system. So they actually, if they're out of balance, then you can actually get a lot more illnesses. You'll pick up different things more easily than someone else.
Can I pause and ask you a question?
Yeah, for sure.
So I have one child that does, but
Mhm.
just lately he's been getting too many colds.
Yep.
Probably 3 this year.
Yep.
What would you say to me? Obviously, I realize digestion is huge in that.
Yeah.
So he's 15,
Yeah.
it's a tough age
Oh,
to
yeah,
eat
15.
well, right?
Yeah. It's good times.
Should he be tested?
Mhm.
Should obviously, just kind of like.
Yeah. So
I mean-
the number one thing I would be looking at would be dietary.
Mhm.
So is there something that changed in his diet? So that would be one thing. If suddenly it wasn't an issue and suddenly it is.
Mhm.
Something that changed in his diet, I would at 15 I'd be looking at how much sleep he's getting.
Okay. We're good.
15-year-olds don't sleep enough. Usually from the age of about 13 to 23. There's a 10-year in there where they don't sleep enough because they either have too much homework or they're on their phones when they tell you that they're not, or they're up playing video games when they tell you that they're not, right? Or they have, too much scheduled and not enough sleep. So that's one thing. So I'd look at sleep, I'd look at anything that changed in his diet, and I'd look at just overall sugar intake. And then trying to get some of this stuff into him. Like most 15-year-olds, unless they're really raised on it solidly, are not going to eat a lot of vegetables and fermented foods.
Mhm.
So even if you can pick like 1 or 2 things off this list, a green smoothie, maybe not to the hardcore level that we
this one
talked
doesn't
about.
taste that bad, 'cause they can
Yeah.
taste the ginger in it, so.
Yeah, it's good. It's got a nice little
Yeah.
little bite to it.
Yeah, it does.
But you could do, a
But you go-
protein powder.
Oh, it's got apple in it too, so
An
it's a little bit
apple.
of sweetness.
Yeah, so you could do a protein powder with a little bit of fruit. Spinach is very easily hidden in a smoothie. It turns it a little green, but it doesn't really give it a lot of flavor. So doing something like that, where you're just hiding a little more vegetables, get his agreement. I'm not saying like, sneak it necessarily,
Mhm.
but say, hey, I think we need to do this, so if I make this, will you drink it? And just close your eyes. Pretend it's, a shamrock shake. Or something, I don't know, yeah, right? That's where I would start.
We put some
Yeah.
mint in it, I guess it could be. Put some mint in it.
Yeah, mint is lovely.
Put some mint
Yeah,
in
mint
it.
is lovely in those, yeah. Okay, any other questions? No, what did I miss? Any major affliction that I didn't talk about, or a concept that you really are hoping to know about?
I think my question on the pre and the probiotics would be, like, I totally agree on the food, trying to get it through your food.
Yep.
But what about if there is a great one that you can take in pill form or powder form?
Yeah.
Can we add that to
Right.
my teenage son's
Mhm.
day? Can I,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? What about that?
Yeah, so there's never gonna be, in my experience, there's no probiotic that's ever gonna hurt you. So you go to the store, what do you see? You have like a bazillion of them, right? So there's, some are refrigerated, some are on the shelf. Some say they have a 1.5 million of acidophilus, and some say they have, 25 billion something else, right? So there's a lot of different bugs in our intestines, and a lot of different bugs that you can take in a probiotic, so I don't know the answer. That's where, like, that's where the muscle testing comes in.
Okay.
So I carry 10 different probiotic formulations. Some have prebiotic in them, some don't. So those are all things that, I'm interested in finding out specifically for the person what's gonna be therapeutic for them.
Mhm.
If you wanted to, get a general probiotic, good quality, that doesn't have a lot of garbage added into it,
Right.
it's not a bad idea. It's not gonna hurt anything. Yeah.
And the same for pre.
And same for pre. Yeah, usually you would look for one that maybe has a little bit of prebiotic added in,
Okay.
a little inulin or something.
Okay. And do you do teenagers?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
18 and 15. Okay, I just wanna make sure. Okay.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Yes,
It's gonna help.
but you know what happens with teenagers? They listen to me when they won't listen to you. usually. If we can get their agreement that they wanna do better, then they'll usually actually listen to me, cause I'm not the same person telling them something for their whole life.
Okay.
And then you're like, I've been telling you that for 15 years, and they're like, oh, Mom.
Okay.
You're so embarrassing. Yeah?
Great.
You gonna say something, Danielle?
So, my sister, do you have any recommendations for somebody that's had a ton of antibiotics and is taking them? She had a dog bite that got really infected, and
Mm.
so she's had probably
10 bags.
10 bags of
Oh,
IV
Lordy.
antibiotics, and she's like, I think on an antibiotic right now.
Okay, yeah, so for long term, so some people, so this would be an example, so you get a major infection, or maybe like somebody's on it for acne for years or something, right? I've seen that before too. There's no one answer, it's the same idea. So what you're gonna wanna do is load her up with fermented foods, a variety. Make sure that she's not eating any sugar. Because what happens with antibiotics is it's gonna kill off the weakest bugs, right? Which would include, hopefully, the one that's causing the infection. But all that's left over at the end of that are some really, really nasty, strong bugs, and hopefully they're, well, all that's left over is strong bugs. Hopefully they're not the nasty ones. Hopefully they're the ones that you want. The strong bugs that you wanted and not the strong bugs that you didn't. So what you don't wanna do under any circumstances is allow her to feed what is left over. So sugar feeds bugs, but not in the way that you're hoping, right? So fiber feeds bugs in the way that you want them to be fed. Sugar feeds bugs in the worst possible way. So no sugar, I wouldn't do any dairy, just none. I mean, butter, yeah, but that would be it. So you really just have to have her on a strict diet until you can get her, with enough fermented foods and kind of rebuild her. In that case, definitely she needs to be on some sort of probiotic. Again, I don't know exactly which one. Ideally, I'd have to test her, but there are some that are a little bit better than others for post-antibiotic. But you know what, this is what happens, like, I get this big catalog, here's 15 probiotics, they're all the best, and you take this one for this syndrome, and this one for this syndrome, and this one, and none of it fits. All I know is that this is a good product, and is it good for you, or isn't it? So I've never been able to say, after antibiotics you take this, because it's never the same for two people. But yeah, don't let her eat any sugar. Tell her I said something. Now or after, yeah? Okay, okay. Anything else? No shamrock shakes, yeah.
When it comes to sauerkraut, do you do the same as pickles? Do you get it cold?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So any of these items, well, apple cider vinegar, so you wanna get it organic, right? Because what did I say, it's gonna promote, getting rid of toxins. So you don't wanna have the kind that is toxic already, because it has pesticides in it, right? So they're spraying, apples are pretty heavily sprayed. So definitely wanna do organic apple cider vinegar. It should have stuff floating in the bottom of it, the mother. Kombucha, that's pretty standard. I mean, most of the stuff you're gonna buy in the store is gonna be fermented, not pasteurized. However, look at the sugar content on the kombucha. They will trick you into thinking it's a health food, and it has like 50 grams of sugar if you get the wrong kind, okay? So get the kind that has the least amount of sugar, or make it yourself. Sauerkraut, either make yourself, so basically it's cabbage and salt. No kidding, that's all you put in it. You just have to have the right thing to put it in. If you're gonna buy in the store, same with the pickles, you're gonna get it in the refrigerated section, unpasteurized, that somebody just chopped up, let it ferment, and kept it cold, okay? So it will spoil faster than the stuff that you can, or the stuff that you cook at a high temperature, but you just have to eat it that much faster. And this is something where you don't have to sit down and have a meal of sauerkraut every single day, but a forkful or two of sauerkraut before each meal, it's a digestive aid, and it starts a good process going. So you don't have to, a jar might last you a couple of weeks. It's not like you have to sit down and eat a bunch of it if it's not your favorite.
Quick question on sugar.
Yeah.
So, knowing a little bit about who I have in my house.
Yes.
And trying to cook whatever. Any sort of sweet alternative that I could do, would monk fruit work, would organic maple syrup work? What could you recommend for any sweetener that could be used that you would kind of be like, okay, in moderation, okay.
Yeah. So sweetener, if you're gonna use sweetener, honey and maple syrup are better quality, although they're still very high in sugar, right? So they're gonna be better quality than white sugar or table sugar, or corn syrup, but they're still gonna be high in carbohydrates. So usually if you're gonna use an alternative sweetener, yeah, xylitol is well tolerated by some. Erythritol is well tolerated by most, so that's gonna be Swerve. That's, okay, Swerve is sort of like the name brand of it, right? But,
Okay.
so it's a sugar alcohol. So again, I wouldn't be, having it every single day,
Right.
but most people tolerate it pretty well. Monk fruit is pretty well tolerated. Coconut sugar is pretty well tolerated. So again, coconut sugar is gonna be actual sugar. It actually has sugar in it, but it's just better tolerated. It has actual minerals.